right. Well, I have 10:18, so maybe we should go ahead and get started. Um, Thanks for joining us, Tara and Julie. Um, Hopefully, we'll have a few more members to come in, but today was just a quick huddle. We just wanted to check in for 15 to 30 minutes, I guess, to see where you are on researching your topic. And if you don't know what your topic is, we can put that topic list up. And also, if you haven't had time to research your topic yet, any questions you have before you get started. So we'll just kind of think about just kind of going around the room, hearing updates on where you are, what questions you have, so that we can, continue to do our work before the next meeting. And I think we'll probably need to, Rachel, let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we scheduled our next meeting, but maybe you have a plan for that. So we can talk about that at the end as well. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, who wants to go first?
I don't mind going first. I've sent out just a draft. I think my question is, Chris, at some point, I think you put out a document showing the different tabulators used, and I believe there were 2 that are used across the state.
Yeah, I think it might be 3, but yeah.
Is there a way that I can get that? Maybe Rachel has that. I'm now on my desktop computer, so I can print while it's in our Zoom meeting, but I wasn't able to do that from my laptop. The reason I'm asking is because in the piece that I'm writing up, it's talking about closing the polls. I'm wondering too if I should do a segment on opening the polls, and I can add something more in depth about how we actually open the polls, including that tabulator, because I think that would be very interesting to people to just see how secure, the system is. And I think if some of these counties are using the older tabulator, and when I say older, I don't mean any disrespect. It's just the one that came before we were using the new what's in place of the new Automark. So there are some differing, although minor, opening procedures, but I could cover both of those if y'all thought it was helpful.
Yeah, I put it in the chat last time, which I think disappears after the meeting, but I can definitely dig it up for you. It's on the North Carolina State Board of Elections website, but I will definitely get that for you.
I tell you what, if it's there, I can get it. Save you from having to do something else.
Yeah, just message me if you can't find it. That website's great, and it's also kind of hidden sometimes. Right. So just send me a note, and I can get it right. I know where it is. I just can't put my finger on it right this second.
Okay, not a problem. That's what I have to add on my little situation. I'm always glad to do some more work, but would welcome comments if I'm not going down the right track with this.
And Sarah, I tried to share the document you sent. Can you see it?
I do.
Okay, good. Yeah. So anyway, if that's helpful, I put it up on the screen.
It is. You're far more technically adept than I am. So thank you.
Well, I wasn't having to talk, so it's easy to. If I'm having to talk and do that at the same time, it's impossible.
Well, I'd still be working on it.
Anyway, is there anything in here you wanted to ask about? Anything else?
This is a very hitting high points, and at any point I can go more depth with all of it. I thought what might be most interesting to people and educational is just how we open and close that tabulator. Some of the procedures are the same, and I don't think people understand that we have a Democrat judge in addition to that chief judge, we have a Democrat judge and a Republican judge that has to be there with me as I set up that tabulator, which includes opening the bins to make sure they're all empty and getting that zero tape. Now, that zero tape shows that you have 0 votes in all the races that are in that precinct, that 0 tape shows up before you even open those polls at 6:30. So that's incredibly important, and that's the one that goes into that blue bag at the end of the night. But that Republican judge and that Democrat judge, they're sitting there and they're going through that whole process with me. That is required. And then at the end of the night, we're going through an even longer process as we print off all these races. We print off 5 identical tapes. One goes home and gets mailed out by the Democrat judge. One goes home and gets mailed out to the Republican judge. One gets posted. One gets left attached to the tabulator. And one gets attached to that 0 tape. Again, that goes into that highly important blue bag that I then take to the drop-off location, along with that that drive piece that goes into a gold bag. These are things that I think might be educational for people to actually know and feel better about the security of our election process.
So it's a very transparent process. I had a question, kind of an ignorant question. Shara, are party observers also allowed to observe this, or would it just be the judges?
Yes, they are allowed to observe that part of opening the poll with that tabulator and closing it. Now, there can only be in there for that part and that part only. They can't come in. They can just briefly come in while we're doing that piece of the whole puzzle, if that makes sense. So, but I think probably that's something I need to add to this, but I just wanted to get some ideas. If you thought that was necessary. I'm adding more work for myself, but
I agree. I think the public knowing the transparency and the accountability of the system, I just don't think many people know about what's going on inside of the black box, if you will, and that is a good educational, I think, message to have.
Well, it is, and I can tell you in the 2022 election, we had observers. And we had more observers that day than normal. And I just took it as an educational process. And believe it or not, then I didn't have the first observer in the primary. So I think that education bit is critical. I think people are just, they don't know. And sometimes they don't know why they don't know. So, you know, if we can help the process along there, I think that will be a good deed.
Anybody else have comments or questions for Shara? Thanks, Shara. This looks great.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say this is very helpful to me to get an idea of what, and I have to say you're so far farther along in the process than I am, I have to admit. I'm still in the researching phase and bullets, really rough bullets. But this is really helpful for me to see just generally the formatting and the way you're thinking through, you know, what kind of information we're looking for and in what method of delivery. So thank you for sharing all this, and this is helpful for me.
You're welcome. And if I have any information that you can use in your part, let me know. Wake County's done a pretty good job of covering the bases.
All right, great. I can go next since I've got my screen up and I can pull up my topic. I hope. We'll see here. Here we go. So I was looking at the ballot journey, was what we called it. And I kind of went into this thinking, oh boy, this is going to be ripe with issues because of some discussion we had earlier about how each county makes a decision about which software they use, what tabulator software they use, systems they use, etc. And so I was expecting to find a lot of variation and probably unnecessary variation and potential problems. But when I did my research, and I believe I used primarily the State Board of Elections website and all the resources they have for the public, which are great, I was kind of I was very reassured. So that, I guess my question for you guys, am I missing something? But I kind of came along with the same conclusion that Shara had, is that not that we need to be making necessarily recommendations for improving this approach to how the ballots are counted and stuff, how they go through this process of being counted, but to really probably focus on educating the public about how the system works and how the safeguards that are in place. So these are some of the things I learned as I was researching. So number one, I think this would be of interest to people, and I doubt everyone knows this, is North Carolina, all voting systems in every county use paper ballots. So there is a paper trail for in every one of our 100 counties that can be audited or recounted in the end. So there's none of this like, going into a tap screen and it goes into some computer somewhere and you don't know what happened. There are systems that I think use the computer to mark paper ballots. So it's not maybe necessarily a handwritten ballot, but there are paper ballots for every person that votes in every county. And then the state board has put in real, I guess I would say, boundaries or safeguards in place in terms of variation. They have a pretty strict system of approving software that can be used. And so in North Carolina, there really are only 3 different vendors that have been approved for North Carolina elections, and they're listed here, and there's links to go to each one of these, I guess, companies or their systems. So anyway, yes, the counties have choice in what they use, but they have to use a state board approved system, and there are only 3. Let's see, what else did I find? Oh yeah, I thought this was also would be of interest to the public. Under state law, voting equipment may not be connected to the internet or use wireless access. So this limits the possibility of outside hacking, interference with our systems. So Sherry, you might be able to say more about that. I'm guessing that's like during the voting process. There might be other times where the systems are connected to the internet, but at least during the voting day or during the voting process, it's not going to be connected to the internet. But maybe you could say more about that.
You are correct, Greg. They are never connected to the internet, have not been connected to the internet while I've been working with the Wake County Board of Election. Now, the one thing that used to be done and hasn't been done now for a number of years, it used to be that we had to connect to a phone jack in the precinct, and results were also sent in that way. But that used to be problematic because so many people were sending their results in about the same time, the system would jam. Again, that hasn't been done for years. So now we're just not connected to that internet at all. I don't think there's any way that system that I know of can be connected to the internet. Now, I will say Some people may be interested in knowing about the chain of custody of these ballots. I know in Wake County that the Wake County Board of Election keeps those ballots. Then the chief judges, and only the chief judges, come in and pick them up on the Saturday or Sunday before the election. At that time, you are given a piece of paper that they have to sign, you have to sign, and it tells you exactly how many ballots and what kind you are getting. Then that information goes on that reconciliation form. And at some point in our process, I think it'd be nice to show this reconciliation form, because it accounts for every ballot that is actually used and those not used. And that goes on this form, and it better balance at the end of the night. And if it doesn't balance, you can bet in our case, the Wake County Board of Elections will get to the bottom of why it doesn't balance. Even if they're calling you the next morning at 6 a.m., they will get to the bottom of it. So I always like for my reconciliation form to balance. But, you know, other than chain of custody, and you know, that was something that came up in one of our other meetings where the sheriff's department, I believe it was delivering ballots. So that's something that was different from us. That's one of those little nuances where we have a general system, but they can vary at times. That's the only thing I'd add. I think this looks great.
Okay, is that information, is it in your summary, or is it somewhere else? I should look for it about the reconciliation form.
No, but you know, that's probably, you know, where we can put that. We can put that in closing the polls.
Okay. And you're going to be doing that topic, right? Closing.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's another specific, being a little more specific. And I can do that with the tabulators, opening, closing, and then that reconciliation form. I just think that's good educational tools.
Great, thank you. And then just another thing I thought was interesting, the public should know is, you know, all systems used in North Carolina have been tested, used, and audited in other states. The voting systems are certified by our state board, and they undergo mandatory testing by nationally accredited laboratories. I thought that was another important thing for the public to know. We comply with the federal election laws, of course. Oh yeah, there was some. I don't know if I was going beyond what I was supposed to do, but regarding absentee ballots that are mailed, just to kind of go through how that works with the public, because there's concern about people voting twice, right? So, you know, once the ballot is received and accepted, that voter is marked in the system as having voted in that election. So if they show up at a, you know, in-person place, the poll workers will know that they've already voted.
Let me add to that. Yes, these poll books are not printed until the very last minute. So there's only, I think there's only that time, either the Friday or the Saturday, that people are still voting, that they could be still in the poll book. But what happens there, so early voting people and absentee up to a certain point, they get removed from that poll book. But there's only a little bit of overlap where they might be in that poll book. But what happens is by 7:30 or 8 p.m. on the night before the election, we are given the list of that overlap. And then we mark in those ballots or in those poll books an A, a pink A on each of those ATVs. And we also publicly print those people that have early voted or absentee voted. That is put for the public view as they come in. And this additional list that we're giving the night before the election, that's also publicly printed so that it can be viewed by everyone coming into that precinct. That's just a little bit different, you know, a little more information. And I think somewhere I may have some information about how absentee ballots are dealt with. I think that seems to be one of the areas that people are most interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, for some reason, I think that may be getting dealt with by another committee, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Rachel, do you know if that's come up on other committees?
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second. What was the question?
If absentee balloting is being dealt with by another commission, subcommittee?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Well,
All right.
duplicate it then.
Yeah, so we won't go into too much detail on that. So Rachel, would it be best for me not to even include that then in this summary?
I mean,
For
we
us.
essentially have an entire committee that is covering that. So I do think that it's well
Yeah.
covered. If you feel like it will strengthen your report, you can include it. I just probably wouldn't spend too much time on that.
Why
Okay,
don't you
thanks.
just mention it, Greg, that we
Yeah.
even deal with it, but just say another committee, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is dealing with this, and it's why we're not dealing with it in this particular subcommittee.
Yeah, it's Chris from the Rafters, but for whatever it's worth, I agree. And I think mentioning it briefly might help, only because I think that tends to be a part of the process. A lot of people think that there's hijinks. So if we have multiple eyes that say, even if all we say is, here's the basics we see this other report, to me that it's a case where duplication might be helpful. And I'll shut up now.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's good to mention it here, but not in great detail and reference the other. But because people, when they think of ballot journey, they're going to say, "Hey, what about absentee ballots?" So,
And this is Tara. What jumped out at me too about absentee ballots is the portion of that's on the screen here about voting equipment not being connected to the internet. I just wanted to flag that it may be worth a little asterisk here, just noting that the absentee portal for blind voters is on the internet. So that portion, you know, I don't know if that would be considered voting equipment, you know, but if you, you know, if you want to qualify that statement by explaining that the absentee ballot portal that's used for it's currently, you know, it has been used in years past for active service members, but also now it's also by legislation that was from a couple sessions ago available for blind and visually impaired voters. So just a
Wow, I've
little
learned something. I hadn't even considered that aspect.
So it's called the absentee ballot portal for visually
Yes.
impaired.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a note of that. So that is connected to the internet, I guess has to be. And I believe this.
I mean, I'm no expert on how it actually works, but yeah, I mean, I know it comes in through, you know, through the
receipt, correct?
So it must be connected to the internet. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll have to read more about that. Do you have a recommendation for where I could learn more about that system? Would it be the state board election site or?
Oh, I was on mute. Yes, I do. I can get you. Actually, the State Board of Elections has a really good little summary on their website, I'm pretty sure. So I'll look it up and drop it in the
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, because I bet it's a little more complicated. Like it may be connected to the internet, but it's probably like something that I don't understand, where it's encrypted and behind some firewall and all kinds of, you know, security things that we'd probably want to mention. Great. Well, yeah, I think my biggest question for you guys is, you know, any, I guess anything I missed that you think is important on this topic. You know, do you agree with my summary that I don't think we probably need to do a whole lot of best practice kind of research here that it looks like the state, from what I can tell, unless you guys know otherwise, has really embraced that in the latest laws, which I think were in 2017, and have really put in a strong set of safeguards and best practices around the ballot journey. And so it's more for our committee, it's more just educating the public about how the system works than it is about making recommendations to improve it. That's kind of my summary, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, this is Julie. I was gonna say, Greg, I think this is such good information. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, and I think the difficulty for people that, and I'm sure most people don't know, and so there's opportunity for a lot of distrust. So the more we can bullet point this for people, the better. I think a lot of people assumed it is connected to the internet. There was in 2016, I was working the polls in South Charlotte, and they had one of the machines was flipping votes, literally flipping votes from one candidate to the other. And they took the machine out of, the voter came out and said, this is what's happening. They took it out of commission. And to this day, I just assumed it was connected to the internet. So I don't know what was happening, but I just made an assumption from there on that it is connected to the internet. So I think that's where, educating the public just about those kinds of things would be really helpful in real simple bullet point terms.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So I'm assuming that was one of those cases where you were marking the ballot on a computer screen.
Yes, she was marking the ballot. It was coming out as a different candidate.
Wow.
Huh.
And I never know I never knew how they resolved it, but I just assumed it was connected to the internet.
That's scary. Okay.
Well, Julie, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I don't have my written form yet, and I apologize because I've been collecting data, and I needed to get back with Dr. Cooper to Chris, you said you had data that you were going to share with me from the pilot program in Henderson and Wake years ago.
Which I did, and I shared it with you, but it was like an hour ago, so it should be in your email.
Okay.
But not until I was getting ready for this meeting. I was like, oh crap, I need to send that. So let me know if you don't have it.
Yeah.
But I sent you a link this morning, and the link actually has all of the output from that.
Okay.
And we could chat offline too if you want. I'm actually reanalyzing all those data again to try to understand more about it and maybe publish like an academic article out of it.
Awesome.
So anyway, and I've got an interview Friday with Susan Fisher, who was one of the co-sponsors of the legislation in the first place. So just try to learn some background there.
Awesome.
So anyway, we can chat offline about it, but sorry for the delay. It is there now.
No, I didn't follow up again, so I apologize. And I think it's just helpful because there's plenty of information out there along with the history of what happened in North Carolina. And it's all, it is rosy. It's, of course, everybody who's promoting it, ranked choice voting, talks about how much people like it, but there are pros and cons of it. So I need to get into that a little bit more. But, again, North Carolina did offered municipalities and towns the ability to use ranked choice voting back in 2007. And why they decided not to go forward with it, I'm not really sure. But, because it's not allowed, we'd have to have the General Assembly approve it if we were to do it. I think the best that I can do is really provide a little bit of history, explain what ranked choice voting is, explain, who uses it in the United States and for what purposes, because we have 24 states using ranked choice voting, but they might use it in municipalities. I think only 2 states, Maine and Alaska, do it statewide. Those are also the states that only have one. I think Maine only has one congressional representative. in the House of Representatives. So, you know, it's just a little bit different. And so just explain, you know, why it made sense for those states. I think Alaska is a great example of how it works for both parties, how it can work for both parties. And so really it would be more of an informational document and explaining why we can't just implement, say, in Charlotte or Raleigh or somewhere, if we wanted to.
Chris, this brings up a point, as you and Julie delve into this area. Do you know if we have a committee that is going to deal with possibly lobbying efforts as you know, as the whole group realize that there's some areas that we can address to strengthen the system in North Carolina, and maybe also appoint person that deals with, I guess, with speaking to the public, speaking to newspapers, I guess our public information person?
Well, there
Right.
is, I think, I don't know if it's a 501c3, but there is an organization called Better Ballot that is specifically for North Carolina that does advocacy work and educational work on the issue. I haven't looked into, Cher, to your point, whether they are putting together a lobbying effort. My guess is right now, just from what I've seen of their information, they're just really trying to build a base of supporters that are interested in pursuing ranked choice voting. And then I would guess that is what they're set up to do, because they have a whole staff.
I guess no reason to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
Well, and they're tied into all the other state organizations on ranked choice voting. So they seem pretty well organized. I don't know the folks, but for our next meeting, I will reach out to them and find out, you know, what their plans are, if any. Because I can't imagine there's much appetite at the state level right now for revisiting the idea. Chris, you might know more about.
Definitely don't know more, but I think it's Better Ballot. I think you're right. It's Better Ballot North Carolina. There's like Better Ballot Colorado and Better Ballot Nevada and all that. And I think everything you're saying is dead on. I'll only augment, not really change anything. But you know, I think my dealings with them they are very organized. They are also very aggressive, and Julie, you did, I think, such a perfect job talking about ranked choice voting that, like, there's some really good things about it. There's some things that aren't great. There are trade-offs. At least in my mind, the key is letting the public know these are the trade-offs. For one example, people with less education are less likely to fill out the full ballot with ranked choice voting. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't adopt it, right? There's plenty of good reasons that we can stop the cost of runoffs in the state of North Carolina. But the Better Ballot people, in my limited experience with them, generally don't want to acknowledge the trade-offs.
Yeah.
Like their job is to get ranked choice voting everywhere. So I think they're really good. They have tons of good information. The link I've sent you might have even been from their website, but they have a paid lobbyist who's registered with the General Assembly, registered with Secretary of State to lobby the General Assembly to do just this very thing.
Yeah, who's funding them, Chris? Do you know?
I don't know exactly who's funding them. Actually, it's a good question, and I don't know. I see that every now and again I go to NCSL, which is the National Conference on State Legislatures Conference. They have like an elections track, and the Better Ballot people are always there at the tables and at the events. So they clearly have some money, but I'm not sure where it comes from.
Okay.
Well, any other questions for the group, Julie, or anything else we can help you with? Sure.
Well, if you have any other questions, you know, let me know, and I'll be sure to include that I'll have a written report for you next time that, you know, I can certainly build upon. But again, we don't have a whole lot of information because we can't use it.
I have
All
a
right, thanks.
question, Julie, on another area, back to that, that computer screen. When you're marking your ballots through a computer screen, do you actually have a paper ballot as a result of, are those marks then put on a paper ballot?
For the issue that happened?
Yes.
So no, we have electronic machines, and then it'll show you on the screen who you voted for, and then it prints out the paper ballot. Yes. And then you take your paper ballot and you feed it into the machine.
Tabulator.
The paper ballot was reflecting a different presidential candidate than
Okay,
what he was pressing.
okay.
I'll just say I heard somebody say it's scary, and on the one hand it's scary. On the other hand, I think it's actually restoring of faith in our process, that the fact that it printed the paper, somebody was able to see this. I mean, to me, coding errors are going to happen, right? People, we've all typed something in Excel and you type it in wrong, or you just misspell a word that you know how to spell. So the fact that our process enables a voter to see that mistake, report it, and get it fixed, I think is actually a really positive story about how elections work with you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is positive that you had a hard copy coming out like a receipt.
Yeah,
In this case, how you voted.
I
So,
wonder though how many people look at it. In
Well,
this, she did, but I'm not sure I look at my paper one because it gave me a summary on the screen of who I voted for. And so I thought, yep, that looks right, and because there's elections where I might only in a primary, I might only have one person on my ballot in an off year or whatever. And so it probably wouldn't have dawned on me to look at my paper ballot.
yeah.
That's a good point, and I wonder. I'm not saying we should do this, but one thing to think through is like, y'all all know. It sounds like everybody here's been a poll worker or something at some point. You get these instructions to the county board, and that you then repeat those instructions to the voter, right? And what if one thing we encouraged county boards to do in these orientation sessions is to tell people, hey, after you've check it on your screen, but also do look at the hard copy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
All right, Tara, we'll go to you and see if you want to, anyway, summarize where you are and anything we can help you with.
Sure, thanks. And I'm sorry, mine is not in a shareable form yet. You do not want to see the mess
No
that
problem.
is my draft right now. And I also am sorry that I missed the last meeting. So if there is any information, so hopefully my questions are not too basic, but what I've run into, so as you know, I'm addressing the accessibility of voting. So everything from people who need assistance in the voting booth, so using the machines, accessing the poll workers, or any assistance either checking in or casting the ballot. And then also, people in facilities who are voting. So I'll kind of go through the bullet points that I have. And I'll tell you the question I keep running into is there's a tremendous amount of information in terms of even like federal guidance from the DOJ interpreting the Americans with Disabilities Act. So like really practical information for the precincts themselves. So like the size of the parking lot and the size of the accessibility of the sidewalks leading up to the buildings and all that information that's way too technical, I think, for this purpose. So I'm trying to identify like, how much detail you all are looking for here and would be helpful. And then also the audience, because, a lot of the information that we have already is geared toward the public, people with disabilities who are voting. So real questions that they run into and what we have experienced in our monitoring work, like what we have seen in real life happening, which is like, for example, somebody goes to cast a ballot and their competency is questioned by a poll worker, right? A poll worker says, are you sure you're able to vote? Or, why are you here? Is somebody forcing you to vote? Or, do you have a guardian that should be voting for you? Or do you, did somebody drive you here? if you're not able to, another thing is if you're not able to say your name and address out loud, some poll workers question that. And, we know from guidance that there is the ability to write it if you can't, any way that you can communicate is valid to communicate that information. So things like that we've troubleshooted over the years. I was thinking of putting kind of in a FAQ sort of a, that kind of a format, but I didn't know if that was helpful depending on the audience. So let me see what else was on my, okay, there's also the assistance for voters in facilities, because that law recently changed a couple years ago. It used to be that if you lived in a facility like a nursing home or a rehab facility and you wanted assistance with voting, anybody who was on staff there was not allowed to help you at all, even getting you the ballot, the absentee ballot, asking for the absentee ballot, mailing it, putting the stamp on it. They weren't allowed to touch it. It was actually a felony for them to get involved. That law changed just a couple sessions ago. I think maybe last session that changed. And so that information is still, the law is good and it's helpful for people who are in facilities, but that information still has not really trickled down to a lot of facilities. The staff members who have been there for decades just still aren't familiar with that and don't know that. So it's a matter of, so again, like, it depends who our audience is in terms of how I write this information. And then, let's see. Oh, this, now that we have the identification requirement, we have a lot of people with disabilities who obviously don't have driver's license and have not do not have access to a place to get an ID. So they are, requesting a provisional ballot on the basis of disability. And so I was going to go through that process, how to do that, how to check disability. And then we also have the signature pilot going on, the signature matching pilot that in certain counties that is, we are concerned will really affect people with disabilities because the handwriting can change based on disability. So I wanted to get into that information as well. And then also the assistance log. So another new law is to require the log of anybody who comes into the polling place who's a non-voter. So that we tried to get it carved out when the legislation was pending, or when the bill was being debated. We tried to get a carve out for assistance for people who, like family members of people with disabilities or assistants of people with disabilities, so that they didn't have to enter their name and address into a log, but we were not able to do that. So now there is a log, and forgive me if I'm telling you stuff you already know, I hate, but I'm just kind of going through what's going to be in my information packet. Is, there is now a log required for anybody who comes into a facility. So, we are hoping that that does not deter people from bringing their assistant into the voting booth with them, or even the whole polling place. And so we'd like to get information out about that, that information will not be used for any reason to question somebody's disability, the degree of their disability, whether they're allowed to have an assistant there or whatever. But that log, is just a new requirement that is, we think, just an additional step for people with disabilities to have to go through when they vote, if they bring somebody else into the booth with them. And then another problem that we commonly see with the curbside voting is people arriving. I shouldn't say commonly. We have seen in recent election cycles, voters arriving in, like, say, big vans or even just a car, but from a facility. And so there are multiple folks with disabilities in one vehicle. They pull up to the curbside voting to vote, and they are told they can only do one ballot at a time. So they can do one ballot, and then they have to go back to the back of the line and go through the line again to do the second person's ballot, so that we've gotten information out. And I believe we got a memo from the State Board of Elections on that issue, guidance to the, was there a question?
Yes, I think we have a process in Wake County to deal with that. In that case, we would have more than one curbside official going to that van, and to, as long as that official is only dealing with one voter at a time, then we can have more than one official on that van processing voters. That's how we would deal with that situation. And that's,
Yeah, and that would be, yeah. And that would be great. And I don't think the problem is even that it's only one person at a time. The problem was that in those counties that we ran into that problem was that they were required to go back to the back of the line. And so it took a matter, a really long time.
yeah. And
But yeah,
I've worked in a precinct where there was a retirement center, and we did have a van coming at different times of the day because that van couldn't cart everyone at the same time. So that is a very valid point. And hopefully everyone's dealing with it the same way. One of the other things that came up is, the issue of voters in line at the time the polls closed, even in curbside voting. If that voter is there in their parking spot at the time the polls close, that person is in line for purposes of being able to vote. So that's another thing for curbside potentially.
that's a good point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of different issues that we see that I was hoping to address in my portion, and I guess I just would love some guidance from you guys about what how you'd like that information and who our audience is. So if this is going to, would you like me to include a section to instruct poll workers, on what kinds of questions they're allowed to ask or not allowed to ask voters, or is it more kind of just this is the law and and it can be a resource for anyone who happens to read it? Or is this information more for the bigger committee, for the bigger commission to address and possibly identify issues that need to be worked on?
Sounds like you've got a big area. I'm wondering if it can be bullet pointed to help.
Yeah, and I'll take a crack at the audiences, a naive crack, and hopefully Chris and Rachel can add more. But I was thinking maybe like we have two major audiences. Like in some cases, Tara, you may have things like this is stuff the public should know about, like how our elections are run. These are good things we do. In that case, I would think the audience would be the public, and that's stuff the committee will want to get out there in terms of messaging. And then there are, especially in your topic, there are going to be some things where there are recommendations, like we've seen things go wrong, or we've seen states that do this better, or whatever, and we're recommending changes. In that case, I think the audience is different, and it's really stakeholders in the North Carolina elections. So, important stakeholders, including the larger committee, but also the legislature, the governor, state board of elections, et cetera. So anyway, Rachel and Chris, please add to that. That's my naive way of looking at this.
And poll workers. I think that's kind of your audience too.
And I think county, first of all, I think this is fascinating. Like I study this stuff for a living, and I will admit that the sort of the disability piece of it, I don't know as much about it. So like what you said about how to move to the back of the line, I mean, such a powerful story that I hope we work that in there, because it's like if the state board will just put out a numbered memo, that's great. But as you know, numbered memos are just instructions, and they are certainly subject to a lot of criticism. So getting that in front of people to know that that's an issue, I think is huge. I think it's almost just making these people more visible and their experience visible, like it's important. And I think in Swain County, the new director of elections graduated from Emory like 6 months ago, and now he's the director of election in a rural county, but a county with, over 10,000 voters. There's no way in heck he knows this kind of stuff. So I think the audience can also be, the poll workers, but even the people who are running elections. I mean, it could be so great if this was almost an as part of orientation of new directors and new board members, and people read through our recommendations. So I think you more than most, in my mind, anyway, like, so even
We're losing you, Chris.
Yeah, I think Chris might be in the mountains.
sorry, that's sorry about that. Anyway, I've probably said whatever halfway smart I have to say, and I'll let Rachel say the real smart stuff.
Well, I just wanted to add to that, you really already said this, but that the public does need to know this, because again, working the polls outside, oftentimes just volunteer poll workers are the first ones to encounter people with disabilities, and they don't know that they can stay in their car. They don't know what they can do. So the more people that have that information in an easy format, I think the more helpful.
We have a flow chart for that in Wake County. That might be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a good example.
I've gotten permission to be able to share this, and that may be something that we want to do as part of this particular commission, is take a county, hopefully, a county that deals with one of the 3 tabulators and that has a good process, and link to their materials, so that counties that are underfunded will be able to have access to this information. I know I've gotten permission from Wake County, and then that'll be for one of the 3 tabulators. I guess I'll have to look and see when I go to this North Carolina Board of Elections site to see who are the other counties dealing with the other 2. But that might be helpful. And it could be that, with the curbside voting, really that particular piece of the puzzle doesn't even rely on a particular tabulator, but pretty much I think is probably state and federal law.
Great. Tara, anything else you need from us, or any other questions?
I don't think so. Thank you for all this. This was very helpful. But I'm just looking at my notes. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Yeah, I think your research is going to be very important. Yeah, but you got a big task. Sorry, you got such a big task, but hopefully it will be very informative and helpful.
Oh yeah. No, I'm happy to do it.
I think so. Great. Well, I know we're probably past time, but is there any other things y'all wanted to discuss before we talk about our next meeting time?
Can you remind me of the deadline for a submission of a draft or recommendation?
Yeah, I don't know that we set one. Maybe Rachel can tell us more about overall kind of timeline. Because just kind of, we didn't set a deadline for us. Just kind of do your best. And I know there's a time point where Rachel would like us to have at least bullet points of kind of like what we're going to be covering, share with the larger committee. That's later. But I'll let Rachel sort of talk about maybe general constraints on time.
Yeah, we're hoping to get everyone to have their final reports submitted by June 30th is the deadline. And I think there's some flexibility with that, but July 15th is going to be the next in-person meeting at Catawba College.
It sounds like we should convene on this earlier, so then we can put it in one document that looks good, you know, kind of coordinate it all.
Yeah, I would say. Sorry, Rachel, could you, while you're thinking about that, June 30th, you said?
Yes, June 30th.
That's a Sunday. So do you want to say 28th? And then what is the in-person meeting?
So that's just going to be kind of like a follow-up to what our October 9th was, of just like checking in with everyone. I think we're going to try to have an opportunity for each committee to present their rough draft findings to one another.
So are we all invited to that?
That's our plan, is to invite everyone, yes.
Okay,
Chris may have some more information on that as well. But that is my understanding, is we're going to have everyone there again in person to present these rough draft findings. And then we, as the steering committee, are going to start working on finalizing it and putting it into a full report.
Okay. And,
Yeah.
and what date was that?
That's
I'm sorry?
What date are we looking at in July?
That's July 15th.
Okay, great. Thank you.
and that's if no, I'm guessing. Do you mind making a note? So I would, but I'm already talking and driving, so I'm violating some law probably. I don't want to violate two. But can you make a note somewhere that we need to figure out how to get message to all the committee or to everybody on the commission ASAP about that? Because I'm sure people are making summer plans for everything. It'd be good to have that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
July 15th, that's a Monday. Okay.
So I'm trying to think of, like, in terms of our meeting, what would be most useful. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'm wondering if we can do some of this like just by email, like, you know, everyone gets as far as they need to and then submit it to the group for feedback, and we'll send feedback to that individual and then they can incorporate that, versus meeting, because I'm not sure meeting is going to accomplish what we need.
I think we've done that in this meeting, so I think maybe in a month, why don't we do just that as you suggested? We submit our outlines or
Kind of like our final drafts, or
our final
yeah.
drafts, and then, you know, see if we've got any holes that we need to fill. Maybe some people just don't have the time to do some of these other areas. And if that's the case, then, you know, we'll know what holes to plug.
Yeah, and if people feel like we need to meet and talk, we could do another quick huddle, schedule something, but maybe that's what we should do, is just plan on like a month from now, people try to have at least by, you know, near the end of May, their final drafts to the group for feedback, and then take that feedback from emails and make a final version. And then maybe we should meet in June, pull everybody together and talk about any adjustments we need to make or whatever to get our final report ready. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I agree.
Sounds good.
And then Chris and Shara and Rachel, maybe we can talk offline about how to engage. There's a few members that have topics that have not been on the calls the last couple of times. So just how to engage them and involve them. And hopefully we can get some of our other topics covered.
I think it's a great idea.
Julie and Tara, I've sent you some of the training resources from Wake County. I've
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
already sent that to Greg and Chris. So, let me know if you need anything else.
And then maybe Rachel, if you could send out or do whatever, however you want to do it, whatever's best in terms of finding us a time in early to mid June, I guess, to meet. I don't know if you want to do a doodle poll or just pick a date and see if it works for people, but whatever you think. We'll plan
Yeah, it
on
might be
meeting.
easier to just pick a date rather than doing the doodle poll. Is
Yeah.
there, for the people who are on this call, is there any day and time that just is absolutely does not work?
Maybe we can just do it from 1 month till today. From today, if that's doable for everybody on a Monday. May.
So are you
Yeah,
wanting to do June 22nd?
Maybe a little earlier than that.
Yeah, let's do May if that's okay.
Okay.
We'll have enough time for those of us that may be filling in holes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I think, Cheryl, I think we were thinking about meeting in June instead of May, kind of like not meeting in May and just doing email feedback and stuff, and then having a June meeting where we talk about our final report and getting that ready.
First part of June then?
Yeah, so maybe the first or second week in June.
Do we
Uh,
want to plan maybe for like June 3rd? Stick with Mondays.
That looks good to me.
Yeah, I think this was a time that worked for everybody.
Yeah.
Seems like this is our standing time.
Okay. So we'll just plan for June 3rd at 10:15 a.m.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I
Okay,
think
perfect.
when the invite came out, it said 10:15 to 10:45. So you just might want to.
Yeah,
Well,
this one will be
so this was supposed to just be a check-in, and we were only supposed to go for about, I think it was a half hour that we had planned. But I'll make sure that the other one reflects that. I always set them up to go over time though, so we're good.
Okay.
Mhm. All right.
Good.
Well, thanks everybody. Everybody's making good progress.
Thanks for leading the charge, Greg.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks for joining
Good
us, Chris,
day.
even though you're driving.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everybody.